Well, hello, and welcome back to another night of Revive. We are continuing our More Than a Holiday series that we're kind of wrapping up as far as the Christmas leg of it tonight. But we'll pick back up at the new year, continuing the series. And Siri doesn't understand, but hopefully you do what's going on. And so next week, as a lot of you will know, we're not having normal Revive, and so next week this will be announced again, but just so you hear it a bunch of times so you can't say you weren't told. Next week, we are going to start out going to the courthouse. We're going to have a community-wide Christmas service at the courthouse with, I think, somewhere around 10 or 11 churches in our community. It's going to be a great thing. And then we're going to come back here. It'll be around 7:30 when we start in here. And we will have our normal Christmas party next Wednesday night. We'll have ugly sweater contest, $10 white elephant gifts, so you need or dirty Santa, however you call it. You need to make sure to bring a gift, and we'll do that, and we'll be here till around 9 or so. So just plan on that for next week. It's going to be a big time. Bring your friends. But tonight we're going to continue our More Than a Holiday series. Last week we talked about the season of anticipation. And we talked about during this season, we're anticipating a lot of things, right? And we looked at the book of Isaiah, and we saw that hundreds of years before Jesus came, even thousands, it was prophesied or promised that there would be a Savior to come who would save the world, that would build and fix the relationship between man and God. And it said that, it would be Emmanuel, God with us, Jesus. And so we see throughout the Old Testament, man is trying everything they can to make their relationship right with God, and they can't. And as the Old Testament ends in Malachi, you see a 400-year gap of silence where God doesn't talk to his people anymore. And so you have generation come and generation go wondering, is God going to fulfill his promise? When will this promise arrive? Which leads us to the question, when was a time your expectations were exceeded? Do any of you have expectations that were just exceeded before? You thought, man, this is going to be maybe this level, and it just blew your mind. Anybody want to share a quick moment? None of you. All of your expectations are way too high. They're never met. You're always let down. Right? You can never be impressed. I'm feeling that right now as I'm trying to ask this question. I can feel the room of just not being impressed. Well, hopefully, your expectations aren't always so high that people can't meet them. And hopefully, especially during the Christmas season, you will get stuff where you're like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. Maybe it's a kind word from somebody. You were expecting them to be mean. Boom, they were nice to you. And you're like, you know what? I wasn't expecting that. Maybe you were expecting, you know what? I'm just not going to be able to get something to a high level, and you get a gift, or there's a performance, or somebody says a word, or whatever, and it exceeds your expectations. Maybe you think somebody's going to be weird, they turn out to be really cool, whatever it is. Your expectations are exceeded. I don't know really what God's people had in mind, but I think at this point they were just waiting for something, because there had been so long without a word from God. And then a star appears in the sky. Angels start talking to people and saying, this promise that you've been waiting for years and years, it's arrived. God hasn't forgotten you. And so in this season, the holidays, the busyness, it's important for us to remember God hasn't forgotten us. He hasn't forgotten your situations. He hasn't forgotten your problems. He hasn't forgotten his promises in your life. The promise has arrived. And not only has it arrived, but it is doing great things, and it can do great things in your life if you allow it to. So that's what we're going to look at tonight as we're in the book of Matthew and reading through these different scriptures. We're going to be in chapter 1, verses 22 through chapter 2, verse 12. It'll be on the screen so you can follow along as we read this. It says this, "Now all of this took place to fulfill what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet And this is Isaiah 9:6 that we read last week. See, the virgin will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which is translated, God is with us. And when Joseph got up from sleeping, he did as the Lord's angel had commanded him, and he married her, being married, but did not know her intimately until she gave birth to a son, and he named him Jesus. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived unexpectedly in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who is born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." And when King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So he assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people and asked them where the Messiah would be born. In Bethlehem of Judea, they told him, because this is what was written by the prophet. And this is Micah. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah, because out of you will come a leader who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men and asked them the exact time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child, and when you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him." And after hearing the king, they went on their way, and there it was, the star they had seen in the east. It led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was, and when they saw the star, they were overjoyed beyond measure. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshipped him. And they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. We're going to see 4 quick things tonight on this idea of the season of arrival. So really make sure to dial in, pay attention, because it's going to be quick, and then we're going to be done. And I know that you like to hear that. The first thing we see is the arrival promised. So we talked about this. But in this season, in the holiday season, as we're thinking about Jesus, as we're thinking about maybe gifts, as we're thinking about giving, as we're busy with our schedules, and there's just a lot of things going on, we have to remember the promises that have arrived when Jesus came. Think about it. We saw 2 prophecies, or 2 promises that happened in the Old Testament, like we said, hundreds of years before Jesus actually came. And then we see that God fulfilled his promises. He was true to his word. And guess what? He sent his only son, Jesus, to earth for us. What does that mean for us tonight? 2,000 years after Jesus has come, what does that mean for us that God keeps his promises? Well, we can know that during this season, this holiday season, in the busyness, in the bustle, in the crazy hecticness that is life, when it seems like maybe your parents are worried about a whole lot of things, your family, maybe your family dynamic is great, and so you really look forward to going to the holidays. You look forward to going to the different homes and houses and the different traditions that you do, and you enjoy seeing family and all of that. Maybe the holiday season is always good for you, which is great, but maybe it's tough. Maybe it's really stressful. Maybe there are certain family members that you don't get along with, or maybe your holiday traditions have fallen apart throughout the years, or it's just not what it could be. In either way, it's important for us to remember God keeps his promises. And one thing that he's promised us is that he'll always be with us. He'll always care for us, and he has a plan and a purpose for us. One thing that I love about the name that was given to Jesus even before he came is the promise, Emmanuel, God with us. And during this holiday season, that's something I want you to remember. That God is with you. He wasn't just with the people 2,000 years ago when he was a baby in a manger. And Brother Clay, we've talked about this. We've talked about all of these different details. But not only was he with them physically, but he's with us tonight. If you're a Christian, he's with you each and every day in the decisions that you make, in the hard times and the good times. Jesus is there with you. And not only is Jesus with you, but God, the creator of the universe, is there protecting you and providing for you and remembering you in your different situations. And so if God is going to keep these promises, then remember, he keeps the promises that he's made in your life. That your life is not a mistake. That the plans and purposes that he has for you, if you're faithful, he will provide and take care of you. And so during this holiday season, I think it's good to remember in Jesus, we have the arrival of promises from God. And if you have Jesus in your life, then you can trust in the promises God has for you. In the good times and the bad times, when things are really busy or when things are really slow, through Jesus, promises have arrived. But in the middle of good things, you always have, sadly, bad things that creep in too. Which leads us to our second point, which is the arrival of pettiness. Now, I probably don't have to describe to you what pettiness is, but you probably experience this every day. It's people being unnecessarily difficult for no reason. Has anybody ever experienced people like that before? They're just petty. You're just like, why do you have to be so difficult? Why do you have to be just a thorn in my side? Why do you have to be like a pebble in the bottom of my shoe that I can't get out all the time? You have to think, look, God and man have had a barrier between them ever since Adam and Eve sinned in the garden. And then now, Jesus the Messiah has come so that our sole purpose in life and having a relationship with God can be redeemed, renewed, refreshed. Whatever word you want to use, it's fixed. And yet, even in the greatest thing that could ever happen to mankind, you have somebody standing in the way being petty in King Herod. You have a guy who is so selfish that he doesn't want other people worshiping this other king because he's their king, and they should worship him and him alone. So what does King Herod do? King Herod calls these wise men, or these shepherds, or he calls the people, the wise men who are going to see Jesus, and he says, listen, I know that you're going to go see this baby that was born. Remind me of the prophecies again. He kind of calls his own religious scholars around. He's like, fill me in on the details. Help me remember all of the fine print of the story. I'm sure I've heard it before, but just kind of give me the spark notes, the cliff notes again of what's about to happen. And he says, kind of be spies for me. Yeah, going ahead. You're passing through my country. I'll let you pass on without any harm. But when you see this baby, when you find him, you do all the legwork, you do all the hard work and actually track him down. When you see the baby, how about you report back to me exactly where he is? Because I want to go worship him too. We see that's not what King Herod does. Actually, King Herod wants him killed. Because King Herod is so petty that he wants to be the only thing worshipped. He wants to be the center of attention. And so he goes so far as to, in Bethlehem, he has every male baby from 2 years old and under killed, hoping to kill Jesus the Messiah, who is going to be Emmanuel, God with us. He's going to fix mankind. And one thing we can see from this story that we will see in our daily life as well is that especially during the holiday season, as much as you want to be close to Jesus, you're going to have people in your life who are going to be super petty that is going to just try to distract you from remembering everything that God has given you. There is going to be people in your life who are going to be ungrateful for the things that are happening, that are just negative a lot, and in their pettiness, it's going to be a huge temptation for you to be able to enjoy and to have joy in this season. Because you're going to care more about other people's actions and their words, and so your focus is going to be on them rather than what this season is all about. Worshiping and thanking God for everything He's done for us. So a warning that I want to put ahead of you is this. When pettiness comes up, remember what the arrival of Jesus brings. It brings so many good things. Don't let the holiday season or any area of your life not be to the full potential because of pettiness. So maybe other people are petty, but you know what? We can be pretty petty too. So maybe you need to do some self-reflection and see, in what areas of my life do I need to be more thankful? The fact that and I talk about this all the time, but we are so blessed to live in America, top 1% of the world in the blessings. The people who are poor here are rich compared to anywhere else in the world that has poverty. The families we have, the church facilities we have, the resources that our church has, the fact that you get to celebrate with family or friends or whatever and get presents, man, be thankful for that. And don't let negativity drown out all of the good things that are happening. don't forget how God has blessed you so much during this season. So don't let pettiness distract you, but also don't fall into that. Don't fall into this consumer, I need, I have to have. But let this season be a season of service. And a season of really ministry of saying, man, God has blessed me so much that even if I didn't get anything, even if I didn't get one thing on my wish list, man, God has still blessed me so much more than I deserve. Because if you were to be honest, if I were to ask you, hey, name me 5 things you got last year for Christmas, it would probably be very difficult for you to write that down. You probably don't even remember it. And yet we put our whole stock on what we want in this season rather than what we already have. And the greatest gift that we could have ever received during this season has come, it has arrived, and He is living inside of us if we're Christians. So don't let pettiness distract you. Don't let greed, don't let jealousy, don't let other people distract your focus from what this season is about. So the arrival of pettiness can come too. Third, the arrival is proclaimed. We see that when Jesus comes on the scene, what happens? Man, people start talking. We see creation starts proclaiming it, the star. We see that the angels start proclaiming it. They start booming out of the sky and scaring the crap out of people and saying, hey, you remember that baby that was prophesied? He's here. And they're like, people are falling out. They're freaking out. They're like, what is happening? This angel's talking to me. We see that babies are proclaiming it because Jesus, in his mother's womb, in Mary's stomach, goes and John, a baby, starts leaping for joy in his mother because he knows that the Messiah has come. Man, everything is proclaiming the arrival of Jesus. And just like 2,000 years ago, when Jesus came on the scene, people started proclaiming and sharing good news about it. We should proclaim the arrival of Jesus each and every day. Not just during the Christmas season. But if Jesus is in our life, then we should start proclaiming it. When the wise men got there, what did they do? It said they fell and worshiped Him. Worship is so much more than us singing songs, 2 songs before service and 1 after. Worship is so much more than singing, period. Worship is our lifestyle to God. It's our actions. It's our heart. Are you proclaiming the message? Do people know that you have Jesus in your life? Do you have Jesus in your life? Because during this Christmas season, that's what it's all about. Proclaiming of the arrival of Jesus. You should be, just in everything you do, you should have joy. We talked about this joy. And it's all about just sharing it out with other people. It's proclaimed. So the arrival is promised. The arrival can be distracted by pettiness. The arrival is proclaimed. And then lastly, the arrival protected. The arrival protected. Jesus is here. The wise men had a purpose. Go and worship Jesus. Petty Herod stands in their way wanting to distract them, but the thing is, if they didn't come back to King Herod and do what he told them and commanded them to do, their lives were on the line. So I'm sure that they were kind of trying to figure out, do I do what I am told to do, because if I don't I could be killed? Or like the Messiah is a 2-year-old baby. Like, do I really hand him over to this king to be killed? And we see this beautiful thing. Stay with me, we're almost done. That after they worshipped and gave him gifts, God provided another route for them to return home. He provided protection for these wise men to do exactly what God called them to do, even in the midst of intense fear of persecution. So to go back to what we talked about at the beginning, that God will keep His promise to you. There's a lot of you in here. That you are so close. You are right on the edge of being on fire for Jesus. You are so close to saying, you know what? In this Christmas season, I want this to be legit and true and authentic. I really want to be able to share Jesus with other people. But I'm just afraid that if I do, that this will happen, or this will happen, or this will happen. My family won't support me as much anymore because they don't understand why I believe so heavy in this Jesus thing. My friends will start looking at me weird because they're like, dude, why are you taking this so serious? Like, you've been this Sunday morning, Wednesday night churchgoer. Yeah, I know you're a Christian, but why? Why does that matter what we go out and do on Friday night, on Saturday night? What does it matter if we cuss around each other or the music we listen to? Why is this such a big deal now? This used to never be a big deal. Why is this such a big deal now? And you're so close to taking your relationship with Jesus to that next level where you can start making eternal impact. And you're just afraid to take that step. You're afraid to take that leap because you're afraid that God won't keep His promises. And the second you step out in faith, His protection won't cover you anymore. And you'll fall on your face and you'll be destroyed. Whether it's not physically destroyed or whatever, you just feel like, man, the world and everything around me, my friends are going to leave me and all these things are going to happen. And God won't protect me like He promises He will. One thing, a beautiful thing that we see is that nobody can stop the plans of God. Not even King Herod, the king of the Jews at that time, could stop God's plan. As hard as he wanted to, as powerful and mighty as he thought he would, as he was, he couldn't stop God's plan for His people. And the truth is, nobody can stop God's plans for your life but you. So don't give up in what God is calling you to do. Don't lay down. Don't stop fighting for what God is calling you to do in your life. It doesn't matter if you're 11 years old or 18 years old. God wants to use you in a mighty way to impact your family, to impact your friends, to impact your school, to impact complete strangers. I couldn't tell you how many people since I've graduated high school has messaged me through Facebook or Instagram or somehow gotten my phone number and texted me because I've had the same number for like 15 years now. And they have said, look, I know that you used to be a Christian in middle school or high school. I have a question. I couldn't tell you how many people I didn't even come in contact with, but just because they knew I went to church or I went to FCA or whatever, they knew I had some connection. And so they wanted to know more. Don't think people aren't looking at you and knowing that you claim to be a Christian, you claim to go to church, and don't think that doesn't matter. And while people might not be seeking for that right now, one day they might, and you could be that testimony of faithfulness in their life that they need. Where they're like, nobody else around me seems to be living for Jesus, but I remember that one person was. Fill in your name in the blank. They were faithful. And even though we made fun of them, and even though we didn't really understand it, now it makes sense. Maybe you're being that petty person who is kind of keeping our youth group from going to the next level because you keep being that Debbie Downer when people are trying to be legit and get on fire, you're kind of making fun of them about it. And so maybe during our time of invitation, you really need to do some soul searching yourself and say, God, why am I not wanting to be as on fire as everybody else? Whatever it is, we're talking about the season and we talked about the anticipation, and the truth is, it's arrived. Jesus has arrived. You know, I've heard this and I think it's so true. Like, there's so many questions I want to ask, like, to former, like, people in the Bible when I get to heaven. Like, what was it like to stare down Goliath, David? Like, what was it like to walk out on that battlefield? Or like, Moses, what was it like to walk up as you have like 1 million people behind you, leading them out, and just by faith stick this stick in the Red Sea and watch it part? What was that like? But I think that a lot of those people could ask us the question of what was it like to be on earth and have God and the Holy Spirit living inside of you, where you didn't have to wonder whether that promise was going to be true because the promise arrived in your generation and lifetime and you lived before Jesus came back. What was that like? Because we just kind of heard from God in a voice occasionally, but God lived inside of you 24/7. And like, why didn't you do more? Like, why didn't you make a bigger impact with God literally living inside of you all the time? Like, yeah, we saw these cool miracles happen, but you lived a miracle every single day with the Holy Spirit living inside of you because Jesus arrived 2,000 years before you came, and because of that, God is in you and with you, Emmanuel. And that's what this season is all about. God being with us. Jesus has arrived. And because He's arrived, our lives should forever be changed. So my question tonight is your life changed because of the arrival of Jesus?